Welcome back to Marvelous Videos. I'm Rylan. While a majority of cartoon reboots and sequels pale in comparison with their original shows, The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest was one of the few cartoon reboots that turned out to be a huge hit. It was quite an underrated show that followed the storyline of the legendary Jonny Quest series that was released in the 60s and included a lot of action and adventures all around the world. So today, we will be exploring everything about this rebooted animated series and tell you everything about The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest. But before we go into our explanation, we just have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is just a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thanks. Now, let's begin. What was the cartoon show all about? The show followed the same premise as the legendary Jonny Quest cartoons produced by Hanna-Barbera and focused on the lives of Jonny and his friends as they traveled across the world and solved various mysteries. Jonny was accompanied by his friends Haji Singh and Jesse Bannon as they traveled with Jonny's father, Dr. Benton Quest, and often ended up in strange and exotic places. The show took place in a virtual quest world where they faced two villains named Jeremiah Surd and Ezekiel Rage. This reboot was also produced by the iconic Hanna-Barbera duo after they teamed up with Turner Entertainment Company to create the show. Turner funded this project to capitalize on old cartoon characters to create a new franchise. They even planned a live-action film and 2 telefilms to be released along with the reboot. They had also planned a massive marketing campaign to boost the show's popularity, and the show was simultaneously released on 3 major networks, namely Cartoon Network, TBT, and TNT. The show first aired on Cartoon Network in 1996, and it was sadly cancelled in 1997 after a total of 52 episodes. While it received praise from critics for its animation and writing, the show failed to garner the interest of its targeted demographic at the time, eventually leading to its cancellation. Hanna-Barbera also faced trouble with the show's creator, Peter Lawrence, who had spent about $11 million by 1995 and had not moved past the pre-production stage. The creators had to adjust this budget by cutting the show short by 13 episodes. Hanna-Barbera eventually decided to dismiss Lawrence and hire a new group of producers to finish the show. Lawrence's team created the first season, and they incorporated more storylines that focused on real-world mysteries and phenomena. On the other hand, the second season was created by David Lipton, Davis Doy, and Larry Houston, who focused more on scientific wonders and paranormal storylines. Main characters of the cartoon series and cartoon casts. The show revolved around Jonny Quest and his friends Haji Singh and Jesse Bannon, who often went on adventures with Jonny's father, Dr. Benton Quest. Dr. Benton Quest's character was that of a retired military researcher, and he was voiced by George Sagai in Season 1, and then later by John Delancey in Season 2. A few of his lines in Season 2 were also voiced by Don Messick, until he had to quit the role because of his deteriorating health. Dr. Benton Quest had set up his base at the Quest compound on the coast of Maine. He was quite a respected figure who was often sought by individuals and government organizations who wished to investigate strange scientific events and mysteries. Dr. Quest was quite an open-minded person who had dedicated his life to exploring the world and looking into strange phenomena. He sometimes got too focused on his pursuit of knowledge and even ended up in dangerous situations while exploring the world. Dr. Benton was married to Rachel Wildley, who was unfortunately killed in an undisclosed incident. Dr. Quest then raised their son, Jonathan, also known as Jonny. Jonny Quest's character was 14 years old during this reboot series, and he was voiced by J.D. Roth and Quentin Flynn in Seasons 1 and 2, respectively. Jonny grew up to be quite an adventurous young man who was always curious about the world and often traveled with his father. He was mostly accompanied by Haji and Jackie, and he also had a pet bulldog named Bandit. Jonny was quite impulsive. He often disobeyed his father and wandered away to explore a place on his own. He was much more action-oriented than his friends, who tried to keep up with his adventurous spirit. Haji Singh was one of Jonny's best friends, and he also worked as Dr. Quest's assistant. Haji was voiced by Michael Benair and Rob Paulson, and his character had a wide range of interests, ranging from archaeology to paranormal activities. Haji was also a Hindu and a yogi, who viewed things from a philosophical perspective, and was quite an expert at navigation technology. The show's creators attributed this to the fact that India was becoming more technologically advanced at that point, and they wanted Haji's character to reflect the same. When Jonny acted too intuitively, Haji ended up being the voice of reason who ensured that they didn't get into any dangerous situations. He also quoted various idioms and proverbs from different cultures to preach his ideas, which annoyed Jonny to a great extent. Jessie Bannon was a 15-year-old girl who often accompanied the quests on their adventures. Jessie's character was voiced by Jessie Douglas and Jennifer Hale in seasons 1 and 2 respectively. She was one of Johnny's closest friends, and she was also the daughter of Race Bannon, who worked as Dr. Quest's bodyguard. Jessie also acted as the voice of reason along with Haji, and she was a lot more intelligent than her friends when it came to analyzing information or coming up with solutions. Jessie often looked up to Dr. Quest more than her father, and she was quite an ambitious young girl, determined to make the world a better place. Jessie's father, Race Bannon, was a former Navy SEAL, and had worked as Dr. Quest's bodyguard ever since he used to work for the government. Race's real name was Roger, and he was a 38-year-old man who had quit working for the government agencies over some ethical issues. Race then worked as Dr. Quest's bodyguard, and accompanied him on all his quests around the world. His character was initially voiced by Robert Patrick, and then later voiced by Granville Dan Hewson and Robert Foxworth in season 2. Dr. Jeremiah Surd was one of the show's primary antagonists, and his character was voiced by Frank Welker. Interestingly, Frank Welker also voiced Johnny's pet dog, Bandit. Dr. Surd was one of the 2 villains who appeared in the virtual quest world, and he was determined to take his revenge against Race Bannon. Dr. Surd had once lost his arm in a fight against Race, and he had then resorted to using the quest world as his playground for stirring up trouble for Race and the Quest family. Dr. Surd had intended to take over the entire quest world for his criminal activities, and he was quite a cruel and dangerous being who posed a threat to the real world and this virtual world. Now, let's take a look into the storyline and explore the first few episodes of the real adventures of Jonny Quest.
Me.
Exploring the first 5 episodes and the overall story arc. The show began with an episode called The Darkest Fathoms, which first aired on TV on August 26, 1996. The episode started with a flashback to about 200 years ago, wherein the pirate Blackjack Lee and his ship, the Ivory Web, were cornered by the British Navy. Blackjack Lee refused to surrender and ended up drowning with his ship and his entire crew. In the present day, Captain Lacey led his team on an oil searching expedition in the sea, and their underwater team ended up discovering the wreckage of the sunken Ivory Web ship. Moreover, a mysterious fog surrounded their ship while the team searched for oil underwater, and a bunch of pirates made their way on board Lacey's ship. One of the crew members, named Charlie, even got knocked out by these pirates, while another person named Mills claimed that he saw the ghost of pirate Blackjack Lee underwater. While Lacey tries to get his team on board, the ghost destroys the ship's controls, and half of their team dies underwater. Lacey also blacks out. When he returns to his senses, he decides to ask Dr. Quest to look into the mystery of the dead pirate's ghost. Lacey visits the Quest compound in Maine and relays the incident to Dr. Quest, who immediately looks into the dead pirate and the Ivory Web. He agrees to help Lacey uncover the mystery and decides to inform Jonny and the others about their travel plans to Bermuda. In the meantime, Jonny and Haji practice escaping with their hands tied. While Haji efficiently manages to escape due to his Haji expertise, Jonny struggles with it when Dr. Quest shows up and tells them about their trip. They depart on a ship known as the Quester and even devise a plan for an underwater expedition to find the sunken Ivory Web. Dr. Quest and Jessie stay on board while Jonny, Haji, and Race use the Sea Slug submarine to go underwater and search for the ship. They discover the Ivory Web's wreckage, and the ghost of Blackjack Lee soon emerges from a similar fog and threatens Dr. Quest and Jessie above the water. The Quest's equipment ends up getting destroyed, and the dead pirate's ghost declares, "No one will have what is Blackjack Lee's." The underwater team's hot water supply gets cut off when their main ship's equipment is destroyed, and they decide to get back into the Sea Slug and head back to the Quester. However, Jonny gets stuck while returning to the submarine, and Race rescues him while Haji waits for him in the Sea Slug. They all finally resurface above water, where they discover that the Quester had been attacked and that Jessie and Dr. Quest are nowhere to be seen. While Jonny rushes to the weather station to get some help, Haji stays behind with Race, who seems to have injured himself while rescuing Jonny. Jonny runs into trouble when he spots a pirate ship, and he somehow makes his way onto the shore and crashes onto the sand. However, he finds a ghost ship on the shore, and the alleged ghost of pirate Blackjack Lee soon attacks him and knocks him out. Jonny wakes up on board with his hands tied behind his back, and he uses his training with Haji to break free and escape. He snoops around the ship and overhears a man talking about his plans to use the Quester's equipment to stabilize the wrecked Ivory Web, and then steal all the treasure that had been stored in the pirate's ship, all all of these years. Moreover, the man also states that he will use Jesse and Dr. Quest as shark bait, and Jonny soon spots his father and best friend tied up in the same ship. He rushes to them and frees them, and they work together to sabotage this ship and make an escape. They return to their ship and find Haji and Race, who are still recovering and in no condition to go back underwater. While Dr. Quest stays with Race, Jonny goes back underwater to investigate the wreckage of the Ivory Web, and Jesse decides to join him. The two try to make their way through the wreckage when the ship loses balance and falls into a narrow sea gorge. While Jonny and Jesse watch the ship sink right in front of their eyes, Captain Blackjack Lee once again makes an appearance and declares that no one can have his treasure. After dealing with pirates and sunken shipwrecks, the show's second episode was titled Escape to Quest World, where it finally introduced us to the show's antagonist, Jeremiah Sird. Sird was a brilliant scientist who worked for the government until one day a congressman cut off his funding for the nerve gas. Sird had then made it his mission to develop this gas on his own, and he even contacted Race and told him he was ready to release the gas in Chicago. Race had negotiated a deal and even offered $10 million to Sird for not releasing the nerve gas, but the villain had turned this deal down. Eventually, Race's team tracked Sird's location and captured him while he was trying to board a ship with his friends Julia and Lorenzo. Race had even shot Sird during this face-off, and it was presumed that Sird died during this incident. While the world assumed that Sird had died, the whereabouts of his nerve gas were never discovered until the present day. In this episode, a wrecking ball damages a container at an old digging site, and the container releases a toxic nerve gas that affects the workers on site. At the Quest compound, Commander Bennett contacts Race and tells him about the resurfacing of Sird's nerve gas. He also tells him that they had managed to contain the gas within a dome for at least a while, but this is only temporary, and then they need to eliminate it altogether. The team then leaves for Chicago, where Dr. Quest and Race enter this dome in their hazmat suits and inspect the gas. They accidentally end up triggering a lock, which reveals even more gas, and they even notice a ticking time bomb, which will eventually result in an explosion that will spread toxic gas all over the city. In the meantime, Jonny, Jesse, and Haji do their research and find Sird's death certificate. They realize that his last hospital record was dated 5 months after he died, and this record stated that he had transferred to the Belle Isle Institute for the Insane in 1979. They decide to visit the place amid a thunderstorm and sneak into Sird's room. Much to their surprise, they find a quadriplegic man in this room, and they are shocked to learn that Sird is alive for real. They introduce themselves to Sird, who realize that they must be there to ask for his help in getting rid of the gas. Sird agrees to help them in exchange for access to the Quest World, and the young kids break him out of prison and even take him back to the main compound. Quest World was a highly intricate virtual reality system, and Jonny and his friends usually used it to play VR games. After gaining access to Quest World, Sird tries to establish content with Julia and Lorenzo, and the young kids decide to take his access away until he honors his part of the deal. They got on a call with Race and Dr. Quest, where Sird gives them inaccurate instructions on how to defuse the bomb. This causes an explosion, and they realize they cannot trust Sird, even though they made a deal with him. Sird also uses this distraction to escape from the place, and the others later realize that he has even stolen their portable Quest World system. In the meantime, Dr. Quest and Race survive the explosion, but Race's hazmat suit gets torn. Dr. Quest fixes his suit with some tape, and they notice that they only have 8 hours left on the timer until the toxic gas spreads all throughout the city. Back at the main compound, Jonny and Jesse go into the virtual Quest World to capture Sird, who has begun altering the entire program. Haji acts quickly and pulls Jonny and Jesse out of Quest World, and Jesse realizes that the injuries on her arm indicate that Sird is changing Quest World's program to inflict physical harm on others. As the clock ticks away, Jonny and Jesse decide to return to this virtual world and set off a sonic detonator that would force Sird to log out of the system. In the meantime, Haji tries to find the back door that Sird has been using to gain access to the Quest World, while the villain logs into the system once again. Jonny and the others trace his location and find that he is hardly 50 miles away from them, and they finally confront Sird and ask him about the bomb. Sird tells them that they should cut the orange wire, and Jonny relays these instructions to his father when there's hardly a minute left on the timer. While Dr. Quest and Race listen to Jonny's instructions, Race suggests that they cut the blue wire instead, and that Sird must be lying to them. Eventually, it turns out that Race is correct, and the bomb finally defuses when Dr. Quest cuts the blue wire. On the other hand, Jonny, Jesse, and Haji end up getting cornered by one of Sird's men, Lorenzo, but he manages to get out of the situation. situation. As the episode ends, Jonny jokes about how he is glad that his father did not listen to his suggestion about cutting the wrong wire. The next episode was titled The Realm of the Condor, and it was set in the Peruvian jungle, where an elderly man sets out to discover a new species of condor. However, he gets cornered by a group of Indians and eventually goes missing. As the scene shifts to Quest's compound, a lady named Estella Shell asks Dr. Quest help in finding her missing grandfather, who had been lost in these forests many years ago. While Dr. Quest is hesitant about venturing into the Amazon jungles, Estella tells him that she has proof of her grandfather's mission and even shows him an old tape. Dr. Quest gathers Jonny and the others, and they view this tape, wherein a man states that Estella's grandfather never met him at their designated spot. While Dr. Quest argues that this indicates that his grandfather may not have survived, Estella shows him a 1,000-year-old artifact discovered amid these forests and suggests that he can at least view this as an archaeological expedition. The team then prepares for their journey at the Peruvian jungles and hires a few forest guides to lead the way. However, the guides soon abandon them after encountering a strange totem in the river. They continue their journey across the river without their guides and eventually wash up on shore on the other end. Race and Dr. Quest set off on their own to figure out a way out of the forest, while Haji and Jonny stay back with Estella around the campfire. While Jonny reassures Estella by telling her that they will find a way out, they hear a strange scream from the bushes and decide to split up and look for the source of the noise. Jonny sees a giant snake attacking an Indian kid, and he intervenes to get rid of the snake. In the meantime, Dr. Quest and Haji appear at the scene, while the young kid gets scared of Jonny and runs away. Jonny tells his father about the strange sound that they heard a while back, and they all decide to climb up the cliff and inspect the source of the noise. As they start climbing, Dr. Quest spots an undiscovered species of birds that are trying to attack their team. He realizes these birds are condors, while Jonny ends up losing his balance and almost falls off the cliff. While Dr. Quest worries about Jonny, the young boy finally finds a ledge and somehow regains his balance. The rest of the team fails to establish contact with him, and they all head to the ledge to look out for him. They find a narrow opening between the rocks and head inside to look for Jonny when they come across the skeleton of a dead man. Dr. Quest comments on how this could have been Estella's deceased grandfather, while Haji shares his suspicions about Estella's true intentions behind bringing them here. They head forward and see a strange green light, and Estella soon finds the entrance of the Lost City of Gold, also known as El Dorado. The group walks through the doors and looks through the place when they find Jonny mingling with the city's locals. Race even comments about how Jonny can jump into the lake and still come out dry, while Estella tries to break a colossal gold statuette to steal some of the gold and get rich. El Dorado's shaman decides to put them in prison, and they soon realize that the prison floor opens up and there are a bunch of condors waiting to prey on them once they fall through the floor. The shaman's son sneaks into the prison to look at them closer, and Estella captures the young boy and uses him as hostage to escape the city. Once the group makes their way out of the prison, Estella threatens the shaman to follow her orders if he wants his son to be safe. The others try to reason with her and ask her to release the boy, but she refuses and even refers to the child as her passport to get out of the city. Eventually, Jonny works up the courage to confront Estella on his own, and he throws the gold statuette toward her to distract her. When Estella tries to catch the statue, the young child breaks free from her grasp and returns to his father. Jonny then goes after Estella to get the figurine back, and the two lose their balance amid the chaos. While Jonny holds onto the footbridge for some support, Estella grabs onto his legs, while the two of them dangle midair. Eventually, Estella and Jonny both lose balance and fall to the ground, but Jonny is saved by the shaman's pet condors, who catch him in midair and bring him back to the city. The shaman then expresses his gratitude towards Jonny for saving his son's life, and Dr. Quest is shocked to learn that the shaman can speak English. He asks him about his true identity, and the man reveals himself to be the real Professor Shield. He tells them that he stumbled upon this city after hearing about the legend of the giant condors, and that he had discovered them while they were dying of a viral disease. He had helped the city's people nurture the birds back to health, and he eventually settled down here to protect the city. Jonny and the others realized that Estella was just a thief who was trying to use them to find the City of Gold. They promised to keep the city's secret, and soon take their leave on some giant condors who drop them off safely at the edge of their world. In the next episode, titled Rage's Burning Wheel, Dr. Quest and his team face a problem when a villain named Ezekiel Rage hijacks a space shuttle and threatens to spread poison all over the Earth. The episode begins with the brother James telling Rage about the B675 molecule that can destroy the Earth's ozone layer and eventually destroy the Earth. While Ezekiel tries to devise a plan to duplicate the molecule, brother James tells him that the molecule can only be reproduced in zero gravity. In the meantime, Dr. Quest and Haji prepare for their journey to a space station, while Jonny and the others monitor their shuttle's launch from NASA's head office. After the shuttle successfully launches into the stratosphere, Ezekiel hides in the back and sabotages the shuttle's communication system. He then declares his presence and also reveals his grand plan to Dr. Quest and the others. Back on Earth, Jonny and the others worry about the lack of contact with his father when brother James and his teammates break into NASA's mission control and lock the doors. They declare that it won't be long before Ezekiel unleashes his rage, and Jonny and Julia end up being trapped inside the room amid the chaos. In the meantime, Race ends up face to face with one of brother James's companions when Commander Bennett shows up at the scene. Bennett tells Race that Ezekiel has hijacked Dr. Quest's space shuttle, while Ezekiel sends a video message back to Earth. Jonny and Julia see this message and decide that they need to find a way to this room so that they can find a way to help Dr. Quest. In the meantime, Race cooperates with Commander Bennett and heads to Russia to convince their forces to send their space shuttle. However, Bennett doesn't tell Race that his daughter and Jonny are stuck along with NASA's mission control team. Race makes his way through the Russian headquarters and finally meets an old friend who agrees to hand him the keys to their space shuttle. In the meantime, Ezekiel Rage takes control of Dr. Quest's space shuttle and reveals his plan to duplicate the deadly B675 molecule in space. Back on Earth, Julia and Jonny escape from brother James's eye and eventually end up in NASA's control room. They devise a plan to hack into the computer system to open the doors and set everyone free, and they finally succeed. While military officials barge into the room and capture brother James, Ezekiel launches the final steps of his plan in space. In the meantime, Race's shuttle also reaches the exact coordinates of Dr. Quest's shuttle, while Ezekiel removes a syringe full of B675 molecule. However, he fails to realize that Race has managed to get into the space shuttle through the back door. While Ezekiel gets distracted, Race gets his hand on the syringe and then rescues Dr. Quest, Haji, and the rest of their teammates who had been captured by Ezekiel. As the episode ends, Race and the others enter the Russian space shuttle and return to Earth, while Ezekiel's space shuttle catches fire and crashes on Earth's surface. The show's 5th episode was titled Dovu's Last Journey, which revolved around an elephant named Dovu who is tragically killed by 2 poachers. The episode begins with Jonny, Dr. Quest, and Race exploring the Serengeti National Park when they come across a dead elephant whose tusks had been stolen by poachers. While they inspect the dead animal, another elephant named Dovu appears out of nowhere and starts chasing after the Quest family jeep. Jonny and the others barely escape Dovu by climbing out of a tree while the elephant wrecks their jeep. In an unfortunate series of incidents, Jonny ends up losing his balance and falls to the ground, and Dovu immediately targets him. However, the elephant doesn't harm Jonny and stops in front of him and waits patiently. An old man then appears on the scene and tells Jonny that the elephant has marked Jonny's spirit as one he knew in his past. The man also tells Jonny that he must now join Dovu on his journey in his ancestors' burial grounds. The old man soon disappears, while Dr. Quest declares that he doesn't want Jonny to go on any dangerous trips on his own. During the nighttime, Jonny, Jesse, and Haji once again come across Dovu, and they follow the elephant as he makes his way through the Serengeti. 2 poachers named Gotlos and Hawkins desperately try to kill Dovu, while Jonny and the others try to protect him until he safely reaches his destination. Dovu finally leads Jonny to his ancestral graveyard, but the poachers also follow them and corner Jonny and the others. While Gotlos and Hawkins first decide to kill Jonny, Haji, and Jesse, the elephant intervenes and protects the 3 kids from the poachers. Dovu single-handedly kills both Gotlos and Hawkins, and then collapses on the ground and ends up dying in the ancestral resting place. As Dovu falls to the ground, Jonny rushes to his elephant's side and mourns the loss of his new friend. In this way, Jonny and his friends often accompanied Dr. Quest on his missions and went on countless adventures all over the world. Interesting facts about the cartoon series. The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest was the only show in the franchise to depict Jonny and Haji in their mid-teens, while all the other shows had portrayed them as a couple of pre-teens. Only one other show, Future Quest, was set in an alternate timeline and portrayed them as teenagers. While the creators of this show intended for the Real Adventures of Jonny Quest to be canon, this did not work out as planned, since the series was set years after the original series events. The show was also supposed to only have 1 season, with a total of 65 episodes, but some issues faced during production cost them the budget to produce all of these episodes, so eventually the show was split between 2 seasons that had a total of 52 episodes. Turner Entertainment had also planned various merchandise and promotions accompanying the show's release. These marketing activities ranged from a special comic book release to collaborations with fast food chains such as KFC and Pizza Hut. These collaborations mainly included various Quest Pack toys, and one special promo with SpaghettiOs even included unique hologram cards based on the show's characters. This reboot series was also the first action-packed animated series on Cartoon Network to have anime-style characters, designs, and themes, and it's quite a bummer that it didn't gain enough recognition among the other cartoons at the time. Marvelous verdict. The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest was undoubtedly one of the best reboot animated series of all time, and it was quite a shame that it was not appreciated enough when it first came out. Besides including all the concept and characters from the original show, this reboot also ensured that it covered the real adventures of Jonny and his friends, and not just stories that focused on Dr. Quest's work. The show was exceptionally well written and included elaborate and creative storylines that were quite well received by the audience. Fans especially appreciated the fact that the show included strong-willed characters such as Jesse and Haji, who had distinctive personalities on their own and were not just introduced as Jonny's sidekicks. One of the best things about this series was its fantastic animation, and the animators did a great job at designing the characters and background locations. The show also had a very catchy theme song, which was loosely based by the main theme of the movie Speed. While the show couldn't maintain its popularity in the mainstream after the first season, fans believed that it had a lot of potential and could have gradually become a huge hit if only they had a better marketing strategy.
The Lost City of Gold. El Dorado.
Conclusion. To sum it up, The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest was a wonderful reboot that captured the essence of the original show and even added more flavor to it. The show introduced Jonny Quest and his team to a new generation of viewers, which certainly made for a very entertaining watch. While it didn't have a substantial impact among cartoon shows in the late 90s, The Real Adventures of Jonny Quest is quite an underrated show that is definitely worth a watch. What do you think about this show? Let us know in the comments below, and if you liked our content, then please don't forget to give us a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Until next time, I'm Rylan. For Marvelous Videos, have a good one and be safe.
See ya.